Alright, so today we are going to do a video on how to field strip the Fostech Origin 12. I am making this video because I could not find one that exists. And after I tried taking this thing apart for the first time yesterday, I realized how much of a bitch it is to do, and wanted somebody to have the benefit of a little visual before they start taking theirs apart. So that helps hopefully you guys out to kind of get a idea of what steps to take in order to do this right the first time around and not fumble through it like I did yesterday. So first step, or first thing you're going to need, is you can use a bullet tip, or I'm using a punch, and then you'll need a flathead screwdriver. That's it. That's all you're going to need. First step is going to be that you want this front end assembly with the barrel to come off of the gun. In order to do that, you have this pin that's right over here. So you are going to want to stick your bullet tip or your pin, or your punch I should say, into the hole. Give it a couple turns just to kind of get it loose. Once you do, you'll find that it's pretty easy to start turning it by hand. And once you feel the threads come loose, go ahead and pull that pin out. Now your whole front end is separated from the rest of the receiver. Now if you wanted to, you can go ahead and run a brush through the barrel. You can clean out the gas plug, or you could remove the gas plug over here and start cleaning out the bore over here where most of that gunk is going to be. But if you wanted to go even further, you can now focus on the receiver. So obviously this is the piston. You can clean that. And if you wanted to remove the dust cover and go down to your bolt carrier, all you need to do is remove these two screws on either side. So again, you'll need a flathead for this. Nothing that is rocket science here. You're just going to want to go ahead and give them a turn with the screwdriver, get them loose, and pull them out by hand. Do the same thing on the other side here. All right. And once we've done that, the dust cover will not be able to lift up until we get this stock into the folded position, because this adapter over here is in the way of the dust cover being able to rock back open. So we're going to press in the spring here on the adapter, fold the stock over, and now we can simply fold up that dust cover. Now you'll see that it looks a lot like an AK, and that is because this is on the Sega platform, which is very AK-like. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove this recoil spring. This recoil spring is being retained by this plate that's here on the back, but they are separate pieces. So all you got to do is just start to pull in this spring with this rod, and you're going to want to take the rod out of its groove that's sitting on this back plate simply by pulling back, and we got it. All right, so now you can fully remove the spring. Now you're going to want to take this plate out. This plate is sitting in a couple rails that are down here at the bottom. All you got to do, there's a gap right here, so if you push it forward, it'll fall into that gap. Now you can just lift up. You also have this rubber butt plate here that gives that spring and that retainer some cushion when it blows back. So this sits the same way. It rides on those rails. You're going to want to push it forward into that gap and lift up. All right. Now we can go ahead and slide the bolt carrier back. You can just use the end of the piston here to slide it all the way back. You might have to fidget with it a little bit to make sure that the bolt rides in the right position in order to come all the way back. And then once it gets all the way back to where it's exposed into these little cutouts, you can actually lift it right up. Okay, so the bolt carrier looks a lot like an AK. It's got a couple lugs over here, and it's got grooves at the top of the bolt carrier that lock this bolt into place. So in order to pull it out, push it back first. It will rotate counterclockwise. rotate it just outside of the groove here. There we go. And once you do that, you can go ahead and pull out the lug or the bolt. You'll see it was riding inside of this groove over here. So as soon as you pull the bolt back, you just have to rotate that lug outside of this groove counterclockwise, and then it unlocks it from the bolt carrier. You can pull it right out. Now the bolt itself is interesting because you've got a couple different pieces to it. So this is the extractor. The extractor is basically sitting at the 11 o'clock position, okay? And this front part of the bolt is separate from this back part of the bolt. What you need to do in order to remove it is just turn it counterclockwise. You'll feel it break loose. See what happens in between the two pieces here. Once I turn it, is boom. Once you turn it enough counterclockwise, it will separate from the back part of this lug. You can pull it right out. You'll see that it's got a part of the firing pin. It's got the tip of the firing pin with a captive spring in there. So make sure you don't lose that. And at this point, you'd be able to go ahead and clean this off if you needed to. And then the bolt itself, you'll notice, has got 3 lugs. So it's got one on the left, one on the top, one on the right. And that's exactly how it sits into the bolt carrier, is with this longer lug that's connected to this rounded one on the top. So that's the 12 o'clock position, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And you could see the little ears here that keep this part of the bolt captive in there, because this part of the bolt, if you look at this rod, has the ears that fit into those grooves, and as soon as you rotate it back, it locks it in place. Also inside of the bolt is the firing pin. Now the firing pin has a tapered side. That tapered side has to be on the front of the bolt. So you're not going to, this is weird because you don't insert the firing pin from the back of the bolt like we're all used to for the most part. You're actually inserting it from the front of the bolt with that tapered side being at the front. Now to reassemble it, you take, again, this bolt where you've got that top lug that's connected to the rounded one at the 12 o'clock position. You're going to take the second part of the bolt. You're going to want to make sure that the extractor is going to be sitting at the 11 o'clock position. So here's what we're going to do. We've got this set up like that. Now we're going to take the top part of the bolt, and we're just going to put it where the extractor is kind of at the 9 or 10 o'clock position, and then we're going to rotate it clockwise. You're going to feel a little spring tension when you get to this point. That's from the firing pin that's got that captive spring. So you're going to want to push and rotate, and you'll feel it lock into place, right? You can't pull it out anymore. And now what you see is you've got the top of the back side of the lug, again, at the 12 o'clock position, and you've got the extractor at the 11 o'clock position. Now to put it back into the bolt carrier, you simply fit it in. You're going to want to take that 12 o'clock position lug, and you're going to want to rotate it to the 9 o'clock position so that's out of the way of this part of the top of the bolt carrier. So you're going to want to insert it like so. Then you're going to want to get it to the part where it meets that groove. So you want that 12 o'clock lug to meet that groove, and you want to turn it clockwise. Once you've turned it clockwise, you'll see that it's back inside of its groove, and now it locks it in place so it doesn't fall out. Now, in this exact position, you're going to want to put this back into the receiver exactly like that, with the bolt all the way forward. So to do that, we're going to want to put it back on the back side of the receiver first. When you do this, you'll see here that you need to make sure that you're pressing down, because you've got the hammer over here and spring that's kind of causing it to lift. So you're going to want to push straight down from the back of the bolt carrier. Make sure it's aligned evenly. push straight down and forward so it locks into the rails. And once it does that, you just want to make sure that it pushes, that you're able to push it all the way through and that the bolt locks forward like so. As long as that bolt locks forward, everything's aligned, you're good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and put this rubber back plate back into the back side of the receiver. Again, find that gap, lower it in. You'll see that those little ears want to ride into the rail that's on this back section. So like lower it down into those rails. You'll feel when it catches, because then you can't, if you slide it back a little bit, you can't lift this thing out anymore, right? It's sitting on its rails. Push it all the way back to the back of the receiver. You're going to do the same thing with the recoil spring retention back plate. This angled part has to be forward, so facing forward. Okay, so it's going to sit in there again, straight down till you get to your rails, and then slide it straight back. So once it's in, it'll look like so. Then we're just going to take our recoil spring, insert it back into the piston, and we're going to pull it until we can clear this back plate and let it drop into the groove that's in this back plate. Make sure that the back plate is all the way to the back of the receiver when you do that, that it's not cockeyed or anything like that. That's it, we're done. Now all we got to do is close up the dust cover, make sure that it's all the way closed, just kind of give it a nice tight little grasp here, and start turning in your screws by hand. If it's not going in easy, it means that something's out of alignment, but in this case it's going in fairly easy. All right, we'll do the same thing on the other side here. All right, once you get it down to where it's hand tight, give it a couple turns with the screwdriver to make sure it's nice and tight. You don't need to take your day out on them. You just need to make sure that they're secure. So nothing crazy. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take the front assembly and reattach it simply by sliding it into place. And you want to make sure that you're aligning this area with the charging handle all the way back. You should be able to see straight through where the pin will secure it to the receiver. We're going to take our pin, insert it back through the bolt carrier side, or through the extraction side. Again, hand tight. It should go in pretty nice and easy. Once it's done going in hand tight, give it a few rotations with your bullet tip or with your punch. And this one you want to get a pretty good amount. Like, you want it to be tight enough to where you're not worried about it coming loose. So don't be afraid to give this one a little bit more torque. Definitely not wanting to over tighten by any means, but just so that you feel good about it not coming loose. All right, that's good enough right there. And all we got to do now is give it a function check, make sure it's all good, and perfect. Let's go ahead and fire. All right, reset, fire, all good to go. Hope you guys enjoy the video.